Hey, class. Uh, yes, I'm recording. This week I'm asking you to watch the movie The Searchers, the great American movie The Searchers. And I wanted to give you an orientation to that movie and why I'm having you watch it, why I think it's important, and I guess what you'll be quizzed on, which is what a lot of you are interested in. So, The Searchers, it was filmed it came out in 1956, in the mid 50s. It's takes place in Texas after the Civil War, so we're jumping ahead in terms of chronology, but that's okay because it speaks to the wider war between Texas and the Comanche Empire that existed from really the 1830s until the Comanche were suppressed and forced into Oklahoma in the late 1870s and early 1880s. So shot in Utah, very beautiful, filmed in, but set in Texas. It's a rescue narrative, which were very popular in the 19th century. Narratives about young children, in almost all cases, Anglo children, white children, that were kidnapped by various indigenous groups and then returned to the Anglo world. And dozens and dozens and dozens of kids, children, and were kidnapped, were taken from their families by various indigenous groups, beginning in the 1600s all the way to the 1870s. It was quite a common occurrence. The reason that the folks like the Comanche would do this, they needed to repopulate their tribes because the lifespan was short. Often they would also ransom these children. They would ransom them back into the Anglo world, so they use them for commercially. And so rescue the kidnapping of children, especially Anglo children, and it happened with Mexican American children and Mexican children as well. It just that in the U.S. The fate of Mexican and Mexican American children, people honestly Anglos really didn't care about it that much. And honestly, I don't can't really think of very many stories of African American kids being kidnapped. A lot of that is because African Americans weren't really on the frontier because mostly they were forced against their will to grow cotton, and the Comanche didn't really move into the cotton growing area of East Texas because they didn't consider it their territory. So anyway, this notion or this reality of children being kidnapped, it was quite real during the 19th century. And this is the story of a young girl, Debbie, and her sister who are kidnapped. And her uncle, Debbie's uncle, John Wayne, searches for her with his young companion, a guy by the name of Martin. And interestingly and importantly, Martin is one of Cherokee, and he'd been saved by John Wayne as a baby. So this is why it's called The Searchers, because they're searching for Debbie. They're trying to bring her back into the Anglo world. So uh, this is why I'm having you watch it. It takes place in Texas. It's based on a Texas story of Cynthia M. Parker, which I don't need to repeat this because you'll read about it in Empire of the Summer Moon. But Cynthia Ann Parker, she was kidnapped with a number of her relatives around 1836. She married a Comanche chief by a guy by the name of Pettinacoma, had three children by him, at least three children by him, was recaptured in a battle, came back into the Anglo world. Her young daughter died, and then we think Cynthia Ann Parker starved herself to death. She was never happy being brought back into the Anglo world. She had become Comanche, and she wanted to go back to the Comanche world, but she wasn't allowed to. So the important thing is that the Searchers is based loosely on the story of something that happened in Texas, the kidnapping of Cynthia Ann Parker and some of her relatives, which Gwen talks about, and her recapture. So that's why it's significant for Texas history as well. The bigger picture is that as I said before, you had this incredibly vicious war between basically the late 1830s until the late 1870s, early 1880s, between basically Anglo-Texans and the Comanche. And it was a war for empire because you had basically two empires clashing. You had the U.S. empire dominated by Anglos, and you had the Comanche empire. And of course, you should know the territorial reach of the Comancheria by now. It was a huge area of what's now the United States and stretched in some cases even into what's Mexico. And so that's the bigger story here, the war between the Comanche and Texans, which is really the heart of the Gwynn book that I'm asking you to read. So, what's interesting about the book, and maybe about the movie, uh, slightly troubling, honestly, is the portrayal of Native groups. I think it's very respectful. I was told by a Comanche expert that actually real Comanche is spoken in the movie. Other people have disputed that, so I'm not quite sure. Um, so you do have real, indigenous folks. They were not Comanche, by the way. The Comanche weren't in Monument Valley, Utah, where this movie was shot. But you have indigenous people playing parts. Now, the man that plays the chief, the Comanche chief that kidnapped Debbie, is obviously he's an Anglo playing a Comanche, which would never pass muster today. So that part of the movie is would not pass muster today. Well, why am I assigning it? Because really, what the movie is about is it's focused on John Wayne, and it's John Wayne's greatest performance. And I'm not sure if John Wayne resonates with especially the younger students in the class today. I don't know if he kind of has penetrated your cultural bubble or not, but he's an iconic character, and he usually plays the hero in Western movies. Well, in this case, as you'll see when you watch the movie, you're not sure if he's a hero or not. He's troubled, he's lonely, he's racist. He keeps on calling Martin, his companion, a half breed. When he shows up, you don't know what his story is. It seems like he might have stolen some money. And so the other thing about John Wayne, he really hates the Comanche. He hates them so much that he's actually gone to the trouble of learning about the Comanche spirit world. He's learned the Comanche language, and so he's a fascinating figure because he's really what one film critic has called John Wayne in this movie the first anti-hero. You don't know whether to root for him or to root against him. He clearly wants to kill Debbie because Debbie has become Comanche. And one of the themes of this movie is he going to capture and return Debbie safely back to the Anglo world, or is he going to kill her? You just don't know. And so, what makes the movie so interesting, and why I assign it, it's really, it portrays John Wayne as, like I say, as a racist, um, as a lonely, alienated figure, and you just kind of can't figure him out. And what you have is John Ford, the director of the movie, has created the movie where a movie where Anglos aren't necessarily the heroes. Now, one of the troubling aspects about the movie is a young Indian maiden is given to Marty and John Wayne, especially Marty as a wife, and they kind of embarrass her, and it's kind of a nasty scene. But what it sets up is her tragic fate at the hands of the U.S. cavalry. So kind of the scene, which again today is slightly troubling the way that she's kind of mocked, it really sets up her tragic death at the hands of the U.S. cavalry, and it gives it even more impact. So for a movie made during the 1950s, it's really questioning the United States. It's really asking questions, especially about Anglo racism, that weren't really asked that much during the 1950s. And it's really held up over time in a way most movies from the 1950s, or many movies from the 1950s, have not held up because you just don't know what to think of Ethan, the John Wayne figure. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Right? You just don't know. There's some other aspects of the movie that I want to point out to you. Note how much Spanish is spoken in the movie. John Wayne had a wife from Mexico and then later had a wife, I think, from Peru. There's a lot of respect shown for the Tejano characters in the movie, much more respect than was normally shown for Tejanos in the 1950s. And note there's a lot of Spanish spoken in the movies, and there's a very significant Tejano figure in the movie as well, a very dignified. He's actually a Spanish actor that they brought in. So it's a much more positive portrayal of Tejanos than they usually get. One of the other aspect, there's a scene where John Wayne shoots buffalo. He just is killing buffalo. And I want you to know, why is he killing the buffalo even when he's gotten what he wants? Why is he just killing them? And this was basically becomes one of the strategies of the U.S. in order to defeat the Comanches, the extermination of the buffalo. So it's really a very interesting movie about American identity, especially Anglo-American identity, that asks some really tough questions about the settling of the West and the complicated nature of the settling of the West. And it's still worth seeing. It's, I think, quite a profound movie. And I think if you take the time and you sit and you're not too distracted, I think you'll really enjoy it. Oh, the last thing I'll say is there are some scenes that are kind of boring. The 1950s, the movies went on forever. I would watch the first 40 minutes pretty carefully. There's other scenes where Marty is writing back and talking about what's going on with he and John Wayne. So some of the scenes you can, especially when the scenes back home, you can go through pretty quickly. But on the whole, this is a movie we're seeing, and it's a profound movie that asks some very troubling questions about our history.